Formula One had witnessed some crazy gimmicks over the 60+ years of its existence. For every great idea that transformed autocar racing from a niche event for petrolheads to the international leviathan that Formula One is today, there is at least one other idea that made you go, hold on, whose idea was that one? I'm Chip from the Digital Grandstand, and here are just some ideas that somehow made their way into Formula One over the years. Honorable mentions: the Indy 500 being part of and counting towards the F1 Championship, radical car concepts like the Tyrrell 6-wheeler and the Brabham fan car, the BT46, and the wives and girlfriends of the racers acting as timekeepers during the racing weekend. Number 10. 1 point for the fastest lap of the race. Not that a crazy idea, right? I mean, there are numerous series right now in the world that offer points for the fastest lap of the race. But in Formula One, it got stupid every now and then. With time measuring devices nowhere near as accurate as what we have today, the lap times in the 1950s were measured to the closest second. This led to no less than 7 freaking drivers sharing the 1 point offered for the fastest lap in the 1954 British Grand Prix, with a time of 1 minute 50 seconds. And those racers were Juan Manuel Fangio, Alberto Ascari, Mike Hawthorne, Jose Froilan Gonzalez, Sterling Moss, Onofre Marimon, and Jean Berra. Number 9. The point scoring system. This entry requires its own separate video, but here's the issue with it in a nutshell. In the 50s and 60s and occasionally thereafter, not all points accumulated by a racer during the season counted towards the final standings. For some baffling reason, only the best results counted at the end of the year. This, of course, led to some seasons when the driver's champion wouldn't score the actual highest number of points during that year. This was the case in 1964 when John Surtees was crowned champion, and again in 1988 when Ayrton Senna won the championship from Alain Prost. Thankfully, this whole system was scrapped for good after the 1990 season. Number 8. Aggregate qualifying. Here's the thing with the qualifying session. Its sole job is to decide the starting grid based on one lap performance, right? One single lap with the car settings turned up to 11, low fuel and maximum attack from the racer. It's a simple concept. Whoever can produce the fastest lap takes pole position for the race. Well, that was not the case in the first few races in 2005. Someone came up with the idea that grid positions should be sorted out based on aggregate times from 2 flying laps. One on Saturday, one on Sunday before the race. Needless to say, this was not well received by fans, teams, drivers, no one really. Number 7. No tire changes during the race. Sticking with the 2005 season for this one, now. A racer going all the way during a Grand Prix without changing tires was not unusual. F1 races were won on a no-stop strategy over the years, but in 2005 this became a rule. Not only that, but a driver had to use that one and only set of tires in qualifying too. Obviously, in changing conditions and in the event of a puncture, drivers were allowed to change their rubber. But this crazy rule led to Kimi Raikkonen having a dramatic suspension failure during that year's European Grand Prix and, lest we forget, led to one of the most controversial Grand Prix of all time in the United States. But those are stories for another time. We move on. Number 6. Elimination qualifying. Back to qualifying we go, and this one's the most recent entry on this list. With only 2 weeks to go before the 2016 season kicked off, someone had an idea. Let's eliminate drivers one by one during qualifying. A stupidly complicated system was introduced that saw the slowest driver eliminated in all qualifying sessions every 90 seconds. It was all heavily criticized by, you guessed it, everyone, and scrapped after only 2 races. And the less said about it, the better. Number 5. Hybrid engines and how they can be developed. Going from the naturally aspirated V8s to the more eco-friendly hybrid V6 power units was always going to cause a stir. Not only were these monstrosities extremely heavy, complicated and much quieter, but also led to the dreaded token system being introduced. By this concept, a certain number of tokens were attributed to each element of the power unit, stay with me, and the manufacturers had a restricted total numbers of tokens to use during the whole year for improvements. It sounds boring, it was boring, and the world is a better place now that this system is no more. Number 4. Double points for the season finale. a concept used to relatively good effect in other motorsport series like IndyCar. Double points for the final race in Formula 1 was not well received. Its only appearance in Abu Dhabi did absolutely nothing for the eventual winner Lewis Hamilton, nor for the rest of the grid really. It was a crappy idea and it hasn't been used since. Number 3. Shared drives. A blast from the past on this one, and back to the 1950s we go. Teams were very much running a designated number 1 driver, the one that received the best equipment, special treatment, helpful team orders, you know, the lot. Not that different from today then. What was unusual though was that the other driver or drivers of the team would often hand over their car should the favorites encounter a problem. This led to some mind-bending results, like in 1955 Argentine Grand Prix when Nico Farina and Maurice Tridgent swapped cars mid-race and were classified both second and third each. Number 2. The penalties system over the years. Again, this one deserves its own video, but here's one of the most notorious in-race penalty ever. With 2 laps to go during the 1998 British Grand Prix, Michael Schumacher was handed a stop-and-go penalty for overtaking under safety car conditions. He elected to take that penalty on the final lap, which meant that he crossed the finish line before reaching the Ferrari pit box, thus winning the race in the pit lane. Opportunist, genius, dirty player? Tell you what, it was both entertaining and baffling to watch that. And number 1, changing the register 180 degrees for this one, the whole attitude towards safety in the 50s, 60s and 70s. And there's nothing even slightly funny about this one. Formula 1 racing during these years was flirting with Mrs. Death almost on a weekly basis. There were no Armco barriers surrounding the track, no safety fencing, the medical personnel was ill-equipped, as were the fire marshals. The drivers were not wearing full helmets, fireproof overalls nor seatbelts. Some races were run through towns and villages with actual buildings acting as edges of the track. The whole attitude towards safety was, if you think this is dangerous, slow down. Don't drive so fast. This was Formula 1 in its early decades of its existence. It took Sisyphus-like efforts from the likes of Jackie Stewart, Emerson Fittipaldi, Niki Lauda and especially Professor Sid Watkins for things to turn for the better. But the fact remains that many racers from around the world died in the name of speed racing in Formula 1 during its most dark and unsafe period. Whew. And that's our list. Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more F1 related content. I've been Chip from the Digital Grandstand. You can find me on Twitter at chip_DGS, and thank you very much for watching.